Hey, welcome to Frost Sports Podcast. I am your host, Frost Raptor, and today is an interesting video because I wasn't planning to put too much out because there has been very little news, and as April comes, I want to put more draft stuff out. I want to put more Guardians content out and Cavs content out, and there is probably going to be a Cavs video either next week. But the Stefon Diggs trade, I believe, is a defining trade and defining move with the craziness of what happened in Buffalo as the Diggs-Allen era has officially ended. And what I'm going to break down a little bit is kind of what led up to that, and also more importantly in my mind, Diggs was kind of an issue, and it was always put on Josh Allen because Josh Allen's the quarterback. And let's start with where it began. So, Stefon Diggs in 2020, this was the first year between Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs' connection in Buffalo. This was the only year they got to that AFC Conference Championship. I want to make that very clear. So, he had a really good year, I would say. 127 receptions out of 166 targets, over a little bit over 1,500 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So, a career year. In his entire career, that was the best season he has had. And still to this date, that is the best season he has had. So, what about Josh Allen? So, I'm going to look at Josh Allen the year before Stefon Diggs and the year after, because there is a huge leap. And I'm not talking about his rookie year where he got absolutely screwed. No one really counts it because he really got a raw deal his rookie year. But let's take a look at it. He had thrown for over 3,089 yards the year before Stefon Diggs. So let's give him credit. And his best wide receiver was Cole Beasley. So he wasn't dealing. And he threw for 3,089 yards. He had 20 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, which I would say is a pretty good ratio. And he had a QBR of 49.4. Which is oddly low. I don't like QBR. I prefer anything else. But he had a pretty solid season. And the defense was a huge reason, but I think he had a pretty good season, and he looked to be promising. And then you add Stefon Diggs in 2020, which to this date, funny enough, has also been Josh Allen's best season. So the first season they were together was the best season, which I think says a lot about Buffalo. And to another point. But in the 2020 season, Josh Allen had thrown for 4,544 yards, had 37 touchdowns to only 10 interceptions. So 17 more TDs than he did in the 2019 season and only one more interception. And he had a QBR of 76, which is absolutely incredible. And that was the first year Josh Allen, I think, made his mark as a top-tier quarterback. So, obviously, from 2020, it looked to be great. 2020 was the peak of Buffalo. That was the best. A really good defense and a good offense. And that was their shot. And unfortunately, they got blown out in the AFC Conference Championship to the Kansas City Chiefs, which I think speaks wonders to about that was their year. They didn't take advantage because they never got back to that point. But let's go back to Stefon Diggs. So you would think season 2 with Stefon, sorry, pardon, throat's a little bit dry. But Stefon Diggs, and you would think, oh, well, Stefon Diggs is second season, it's got to be better. It's got to be so much better. In the 2021 season, Stefon Diggs had another 1,000-yard season, so still really good, but there's a notable drop-off. Now, obviously, this is when you have Gabe Davis. This is when you have Dawson Knox. This is, I think, when they got Cook. I don't know if they got Cook in 2021 or 2022. I think it's 2021. And you see him only have 1,225 yards. However, and I want to make this a little bit of kind of, just adding a little bit of spice. He had 2 less targets in 2021 than he did in 2020. and his receptions dropped off by 24. So his receptions dropped off and his targets barely dropped off. But, he still had a solid season. He had 10 touchdowns, so he got 2 more TDs than he did in 2020. But at the same time, I'm not counting fumbles with any of this because that's not important, but you saw a dip in 2021, and you might have said, maybe Josh Allen had a significant dip in 2021. Well, let's go to Josh Allen. Josh Allen had another 4,000-yard season. This time he dipped a little bit as well, so you could be like, he dipped. And then you look at his season. 36 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. He turned the ball over a little bit more, like a decent bit more, and he only got 1 less touchdown. So Josh Allen, you could make the statement, fell off a little bit, but he didn't fall off that much. Josh Allen still had a really good season, but Stephon Diggs, notably, I think, dropped off a little bit because, take a look at it. He had about the same amount of targets and a good bit of less yards. So, and in 2021, as we all love to remember, in this great, great time, that was the Damar Hamlin year, which obviously nobody wants to remember. That was horrible. But that was the year they got absolutely beat against Cincinnati. And I'm pretty sure they were home for that too, which that made that loss sting a lot more. That was, I believe, the first offseason where there were rumblings that Diggs was not happy with Josh Allen, and there was a little bit of beef, and then Diggs started stirring the pot, and then the pot got cooled, and then Diggs got an extension, I think somewhere in that time, I don't remember where. And, there were some grumblings of there might be issues with Diggs, but again, nobody was going to acknowledge it because Buffalo was still a great team. They had a very young core, and they had a window. So no one was really going to worry about that. But let's go back to, let's take a little bit back. But there is one other thing I want to mention, especially about that year in 2021. Josh Allen's rushing stats. He had 122 carries for 763 yards. He was essentially their running game as well. So Josh Allen was trying to essentially do it all. And that's, while Diggs had the same amount of love, two targets less, and did a good bit more. And before we go into playoffs, I want to make this very clear. Diggs has disappeared several times, and I think this was the first year that people blatantly saw Diggs not show up in the postseason. So I think that needs to just be mentioned. But let's go to 2022. Stephon Diggs in 2022 had another drop-off in targets. However, only by 10. He had 154 targets, and this time he had is that 2022? Yeah, it is. Sorry, I'm trying to look at my sheet. 154 targets and 108 receptions. So 5 more receptions, but definitely a drop-off. He had, however, and this is the big however or but or whatever you want to say, this was his second best season in Buffalo. He had 1,429 yards. He had 11 TDs, and he had a really good season. Now, again, receptions were dropping off, and targets were dropping off. His targets dropped by 10, but his receptions only went up by 5. So he was still, you could make the statement, still declining, but he had a really good season and took advantage of everything he did. This was debatably his second best season in Buffalo. And this was with quite a bit of other weapons. Now you're talking about Gabe Davis, Dawson Knox, and OJ Howard. And now you're trying to implement the run game. So you're definitely seeing Diggs having a revival. And this is the season where maybe Diggs is still a very elite receiver. Maybe Diggs is a top 5 receiver. And then let's talk about Josh Allen. Because Josh Allen, this was his worst season debatably worst season in the Diggs era, where he threw for 4,283 yards. He had 35 TDs to 14 interceptions. So basically, he had a repeat year. He had a QBR of 73. The reason I mention that is the second best QBR he had in his career. Which, again, he had a pretty good year in 2022. Maybe that was a DeMar Hamlin year. I'm going to be honest, and I apologize for this. Buffalo's losses really, really start to just add up because I have to remember what's Kansas City and what isn't. And quite frankly, I only remember them losing to Kansas City twice and then losing to... who did they lose to? Oh, yeah, 2021 was the shootout with Kansas City. So that was heartbreaking, but, Josh Allen showed up. Yeah, that means 2022 was the Bengals' year, and that makes a lot of sense by looking at the stats. So 2022, no one showed up. I apologize for that. Like I said, their losses are just, it's ridiculous on how much Buffalo has went through. But I want to make the other example of 2022. His carries went up by 2, which I find very alarming, and his yards only went down by 1. So he still was the team's best running back, and he was still trying to do it all. So that's probably why his passing yards went down. But Diggs had a great year, and Josh Allen didn't have as good a year, so people were going to say, well, Stephon Diggs is right. Like, look how good Stephon Diggs is. I mean, so the fan base was on Stephon Diggs' side. But then, drama brewed again. Stephon Diggs might get traded. There's all these rumors. He doesn't like Josh Allen. He's tired of not winning. He's blaming Josh Allen. And there was a lot of blaming Josh Allen. Especially because people were starting to say he couldn't beat Mahomes. He can't get it done. Which leads us to the 2023 season. Now, I have gone from Diggs stats to Josh Allen stats. I am going to go from Josh Allen stats to Diggs stats because I find it very interesting. Josh Allen had a upswing of a year. 4,306 yards, and this was 29 TDs to 18 interceptions. Now, you might say, well, how's that an upswing? That's terrible. Like, he didn't have 30 touchdowns. He had a career high in interceptions. Like, how bad was it? Well, he had a QBR of 69.6, which was his third highest in his career, and one of the highest in a year where quarterbacks sucked. However, this year, they kind of used the running back a little bit more, and that's why he only had 111 carries and 524 yards, which is good. So he was having a down year, but he still was, I would say, had an elite year. He had more yards. Unfortunately, just kind of had a down year. So you might be like, oh, the Josh Allen, he's terrible. He needs Stephon Diggs. He needs all these weapons. Oh, they're making him. This is Stephon Diggs' year. Now, I want to just mention this real quick. Stephon Diggs in Buffalo had 1,500 yards in 2020, 1,200 yards in 2021, but got more TDs, and 2022, 1,400 yards, and then there was 2023, where Stephon Diggs had the third highest amount of targets in Buffalo at 160, and he had a reception less than he did the previous year. Now, again, we're used to these receptions being his receptions in Buffalo, besides his first year, being in the 100s and in the low 100s. However, this was the first year where he didn't really take too much advantage of it. And that's why he had 1,183 yards. A still good season. I want to make that clear. I'm not calling him washed. But you do look at it and you do kind of wonder, oh, and mind you, he is 31 years old. And this year he had 8 touchdowns. And yeah, there's a reason why he was not the main weapon. You have Gabe Davis, you have Kincaid, you have Dawson Knox, you have Jared Cook, you have essentially all these weapons, and you still can't get it done, and especially because Diggs disappeared in the playoffs yet again. Which then I think, let's take some time to look at their postseason, because I want to really look at it. We know Josh Allen. Josh Allen has shown up or disappeared, so we know that. This is Stefon Diggs' entire postseason career for Buffalo. Let's begin. This was his first season in Buffalo. First season, so 2020. 20 receptions, 31 targets, 311 yards, 2 TDs. I would say that's really, really good. That is really good for playoffs. Now, obviously, he did play more games, so you can make that statement of, oh, well, he played so many games, that's why. Well, yeah, he still played incredible. Now, we go to 2021. Mind you, this was the year that they beat the crap out of the Patriots, and then... this was the year they beat the crap out of the Patriots, and then got to play the Kansas City Chiefs with that barn burner. You know, the barn burner where there was no defense, and that easily an entire team that had like an elite wide receiver could have, just had a breakout game. Yeah, this was Stefon Diggs in those games. 10 targets, 6 receptions, 67 yards. Not terrible, but for an elite receiver who, by the way, Diggs was regarded as a top 5 wide receiver. Just saying. And then we go to 2022, sorry. This was the year they lost to the Bengals, But, heartache, whatever. This was when they played Miami that really didn't have a defense, and they also got to play the wonders of Cincinnati. 11 receptions, 19 targets, so you see an uptick in targets and receptions. 149 yards. So you're like, oh, they had a better game. I would also like to mention Diggs has not scored a touchdown in the last 2 years. But what about this year? What about, they played Pittsburgh. Oh, man, they played the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs. And Stefon Diggs was all grumpy that he was not getting attention. He was all mad that Josh Allen is getting more love than him, even though he was the reason that Josh Allen reached these heights. Even though if you look at it and the drafting and the picks that have been made recently is to alleviate Stefon Diggs' pressure and to also make Josh Allen have more than one weapon, because apparently spreading the ball around with Josh Allen works a lot better. But in 2023, he had 10 receptions for 17 targets. So, 2 targets less and 1 less reception for 73 yards, no touchdowns. I'll put it to you this way. He has had, in the postseason, in total for Buffalo, he has had 2 touchdowns and a fumble. And he has really not shown up since 2020. Yeah. This is kind of where I think we need to start looking at one Stefon Diggs and saying, I'm sorry, but what? Like, genuinely what? Now let's go to Josh Allen, because, Josh Allen's the problem. Well, let's take a look at Josh Allen real quick. So, let's talk about, 2019 when he first made the playoffs. This was his first playoff game. 264 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He was sacked 3 times, had a QBR of 42.5. That was his first one. He was a wild card team. So whatever. But he didn't do terrible. He didn't do terrible for one game. He didn't turn the ball over that much. So, you take it. You take it. 2020, prime year with Diggs. He had a QBR of 61.7, played 3 games, had 817 yards, and, he did really well. Like, 5 TDs, 1 interception. Really good postseason. But remember 2021 where, one Stephon Diggs did not really do that much? 2021, remember, Stephon Diggs had 10 targets, 6 receptions, and only 67 yards and no touchdowns. Josh Allen in 2021 debatably had one of the best postseason. I know it's 2 games, but he had 637 yards. Was it this year? Yeah, 637 yards. And he had 9 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a QBR of 95.5. So I just want to make that very clear that Josh Allen actually showed up and Stephon Diggs really didn't. And yeah, but let's go to 2022 because Josh Allen played in 2 playoff games. He had 616 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions and a QBR of 40.5. Oh, that's terrible. Stephon Diggs clearly did better. No, Stephon Diggs did not do better. 11 receptions, 19 targets, and 149 yards, and no touchdown. So, okay, wash. Let's wash that away. Both didn't. Okay. What about this postseason? Yeah, let's talk about this postseason. That's great. This is 389 yards, 4 TDs, no interceptions, a QBR of 79.4. And he really, and I mean really, tried to will his team to a victory. What did Stephon Diggs do? 10 receptions, 17 targets, only 73 yards, and had a fumble. So, yeah, that's how that season went. So why am I bringing up all this? I'm not really a big stat guy. I don't really believe in all of this. Well, I'll tell you why I'm bringing this up. Because I am tired of people hating Josh Allen for not showing up in the postseason when Stephon Diggs has consistently disappeared since 2020. Stephon Diggs is one of the most diva receivers out there. I don't care about George Pickens being a diva. I don't care about that because he doesn't throw his quarterback under the bus. He throws his OC under the bus. He throws someone else. Diggs has consistently thrown Josh Allen under the bus. And now he is crying and whining and finally gone. And now we can talk about it. The Diggs-Allen dynasty, or what era, I don't even know what you want to call it. I'm going to call it era, is over. And it was a disappointment. No Super Bowls. Not one Super Bowl made. Only one AFC conference, and then never being able to get past the second round. Now, this will be blamed on Josh Allen if he does not perform next year, and if Diggs does not perform. And quite frankly, I think it's just an era of disappointment. And also kind of an era of recognition. That 2020 year was probably the best shot Buffalo had at going to a Super Bowl. A healthy, good defense and a healthy, good offense. And it just didn't happen. And unfortunately, that was it. That was their peak. Their peak was year 1 and then had a decline. And now it's over. I think Buffalo is still going to be a competitive team. They're probably going to make the playoffs next year. If they don't, that would be a shock, especially because I didn't think they were going to make it this year, but they did. So, I don't know what the future holds. I think Buffalo has a lot of decisions to make, and I think Sean McDermott and Bradley Bean, or whoever, Brandon Bean, I don't care what their GM's name is, I think this is their last shot at trying to put a team together. And I mean, if you fail, I'm not saying rebuild because you have Josh Allen, but I do think you need to reload, and this might be a reload year, which is fine. It's just that your division does have 2 other teams in the Jets and the Dolphins that can compete this year, so I don't think they're going to win the division. I think Miami or the Jets' year is like, this is your year to take the division. I'm not saying Buffalo can't. I think they've got a lot of promise because Josh Allen's there, but we will see. As for Diggs, I think he'll do good in Houston. I think Houston has set themselves up with a very nice exit plan. But I think if you want me to describe what the wagon has been, it's just been a broken wagon since 2020. They just have not been able to fix it. They've just never been able to get past the Chiefs. And even when they didn't have to face the Chiefs, they still lost. And it's just, Buffalo's kind of been a bit of a disappointment. And I think you can point the fingers at everything. But, I mean, in the end, Josh Allen is not the main reason Buffalo did not make the playoff, did not get there. I think he can have some bad games, and yeah, he has had issues. But I think people need to look at Stephon Diggs as much more of a playoff disappearing act than Josh Allen. So that's kind of where I'm going to put the video now. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know it's about a very long episode, but please like and subscribe. That would be much appreciated. And don't forget, stay frosty. See you guys later. Love y'all.